Coming to the epidemiology of the cardiovascular disease, if we compare the global mortality versus mortality in India due to cardiovascular disease, the scenario doesn't have any much difference. The global mortality happens to be 31%, whereas in India it is almost around 26%. And this makes CVD as one of the leading cause of death globally as well as in our country. And this has been substantiated by the WHO statistics, which also confirms that the mortality due to CVD in India is almost around 26%. During our medical school days, we were taught that the risk factors for the atherosclerosis were broadly classified into two categories, that is modifiable and the other category was non-modifiable risk factor. Modifiable risk factor, as we all know, are cigarette smoking, hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes mellitus, family history of coronary artery disease, or lifestyle risk factors like obesity, physical inactivity, atherogenic diet, etc. Whereas non-modifiable risk factors, age and sex, men above 45 years and women above 55 years. And CVDs, as far as sex is concerned, are more common in males but more severe in females. We also know that as the severity of these risk factor increases, the risk of acquiring cardiovascular disease also increases, and this is justified here. We can see in this figure the blood pressure of 120 compared with that of blood pressure of 160. The risk has increased manyfold. So we can say that higher the risk score, higher the incidence. But later, when people gathered some more data and then they looked into those data, they found that 60% of those who develop coronary events have either only one, or even some of the patients they didn't had any risk factors. More than half either have normal or just mildly increased lipid values. In one of the studies, it was found that about 12 to 16% of the CAD patients were quite young. Their age was less than 40 years. So they started pondering. These people, they didn't have any of these risk factors. Then what could be the cause? Why did they develop CVDs? So a lot of research work was focused towards this, and a question was raised: is there any other cause for CVD? Because despite lifestyle management and despite controlling the lipids, cardiovascular disease remained a major cause of death. And dyslipidemia, though one of the major risk factor, was found to be present only in 50% of the patients with cardiovascular disease. The early fatty streak, which was studied, was found to be rich in macrophages and T lymphocytes, and cytokines had an impact upon the cellular makeup of the plaque lesions. All these findings led people to think whether atherosclerosis is an inflammatory disorder. By the turn of the century, many papers were published. Some of them in 2003, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the American Heart Association stated that measurement of high sensitivity CRP may help direct further evaluation and therapy in primary prevention of the cardiovascular disorder. This was their statement in 2003. It may help. The entire adult population should not be screened for hsCRP for the purpose of cardiovascular risk statement. This was the statement in 2003. In 2010, ACCF and AHA guidelines for assessment of cardiovascular risk in asymptomatic adults, they published another paper which mentioned that measurement of CRP in apparently healthy elderly people to identify cardiovascular risk may benefit them. So, by 2013, ACC and AHA guidelines on the treatment of blood cholesterol to reduce atherosclerotic cardiovascular risks in adults published another paper in which they advocated that the use of HSCRP for stratifying the high-risk patient for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease could be one of the options and it should be tried. So this is what they advocated. So there was a huge change from 2003 to 2013. So now they have identified some novel risk factors for CVDs. And some of those novel risk factors are CRP level, CAC, that is coronary artery calcium score, lipoprotein A levels, homocysteine A levels, leukocyte count, fasting glucose, periodontal disease, ankle brachial index, carotid intima media thickness, C-reactive protein, pentraxin, homocysteine, serum amyloid A, fibrinogen level, phospholipase, lysophosphatidylcholine and galactine-3, procalcitonin, soluble CXC chemokine, proteinase, C3-C4 concentration ratio, microalbuminuria, and soluble intracellular adhesion molecules. So many novel risk factors or pro-inflammatory biomarkers, they were found in the subsequent research that followed. Now, all these risk factors, they are pro-inflammatory, therefore they have to work somewhere at the cellular level. So what exactly is happening at the cellular level? To understand that, we need to go back and try to understand the basic mechanism of the atherosclerosis. So we all know that the normal blood vessel has got three lining, the endothelial, the elastic connective tissue, and the smooth muscle cell. Endothelial cells provide an active and dynamic interface between the bloodstream and the arterial wall. Why dynamic? Because it has got major role in maintaining the normal structure of the blood vessel. So it has got many functions to do. It provides a semi-permeable barrier that regulates the exchange of fluid, nutrients, gases, waste between blood and tissue, regulates number of other less obvious processes, but more important is that it provides a unique surface that allows the cellular elements of the blood to flow without adhering to the vessel lining, unless some insult has perturbed the cells. And when this perturbation occurs, endothelial cells secrete cytokinase that trigger and maintain an inflammatory response. And apart from this two important work, it also helps in regulating the constriction and relaxation of the vessel by releasing vasodilatory molecules like nitric oxide or prostacyclin, or vasoconstrictive molecules like endothelin and angiotensin. So as I said, under normal conditions, leukocytes in the blood do not adhere to the endothelial cells that line all the blood vessels. For atherosclerosis to happen, something has to be triggered, and this trigger is usually by a subtle injury, which could be either subtle physical or chemical insults to the endothelial cell layer of the arteries. A new theory has been proposed, that is the response to injury theory, which has achieved a widespread acceptance among the scientific and medical scholars. And this theory holds that the earliest event in atherogenesis is injury to the endothelium. Injury can be triggered by any number of insults, either alone or in combination. And some of these insults are like direct trauma, hypertension, turbulent blood flow, reactive oxygen species, hyperlipidemia, chronically elevated blood glucose level, or substances like homocysteine. Once the injury to endothelium occurs, This injury provokes an inflammatory response, and endothelial cell, they begin to produce surface adhesion molecules such as VCAM. So it starts producing surface adhesion molecules VCAM1. The release of surface adhesion molecule causes the monocytes and the T lymphocytes to adhere to the endothelium. Later, these monocytes and T lymphocytes, they migrate beneath the endothelium by squeezing themselves between the two endothelial cells. So a gap between the two endothelial cells, and through which they squeeze into the intima of the blood vessels. This also triggers chemotaxis, that is the circulating monocytes and T lymphocytes are attracted to the site of injury by chemoattractant cytokines, that is chemokines. You can see here that this round blue shape is a monocyte which comes in contact with the surface adhesion molecule, Y-shaped, the first figure. It gets attached to it and then it becomes activated. It enters into the endothelium. The endothelial cell also changes its shape. The tight junction between the endothelial cells, they loosen. This increases the permeability of fluid, lipids and leukocytes. The lipoprotein particles, especially the LDL, enter the arterial wall and they undergo oxidation. So we can see this, the LDL particle, they are entering into the endothelium. Once the endothelium, LDL enters in the endothelium, there it comes in contact with substances like nitric oxide or macrophages or some enzymes like lipoxygenase, and then it undergoes oxidation. Now this oxidized LDL works as a trigger for inflammation. So we can see here the LDL has got oxidized here, and this works as a trigger for inflammation. This oxidized LDL, it comes in contact with the monocyte and the dendritic cells, and this monocyte, it transforms itself into a macrophage. This macrophage, through different pathways, it comes in contact with the oxidized LDL and then it imbibes the oxidized LDL into it, and it goes on. As and when the LDL molecule comes in contact with the macrophage, it goes on imbibing the LDL. So in the intima, the migrated monocytes differentiate into macrophage. These macrophages begin to take up oxidized LDL, and macrophage then retain the lipid what they have taken, and as soon as they become more lipid laden, we call these cells as foam cells. And eventually the foam cell will undergo apoptosis, they die, but the lipid will accumulate within the intima, and that would be the beginning of the atherosclerotic process. So you can see here different pathways are used, the NF-kB pathway or kynurenine pathway. So in kynurenine pathway, the tryptophan is the molecule. It shows the metabolism of the tryptophan, and there are various steps. The tryptophan gets converted into kynurenine, subsequently into 3-hydroxyl kynurenine and 3-hydroxyanthralinic acid, that is 3-HAA, which gets converted to quinolic acid and nicotinamide. This nicotinamide, it is responsible, ultimately it is responsible for the release of reactive, that is reactive oxygen species, which then enters into the mitochondria. The mitochondria then releases a cytochrome C, and this cytochrome C comes in contact with the macrophage, and then it leads to apoptosis. So this is the whole process of atherosclerosis which is going on. So we can see here that the foam cells are formed, and ultimately the macrophage, it releases all the inflammatory mediators, that is CRP, CD4, CD40, CD40L, TN alpha, IL1, IL6, etc. And you can see here, so whenever the endothelium receives an external inflammatory stimuli, it comes in contact with the NF-kB, IKB, and it activates the NF-kB, IKB through IKB kinase and makes it active. The activation of NF-kB then leads to translocation of NF-kB into the nucleus of the cell, and this ultimately releases the inflammatory mediators, that is pro-inflammatory cytokines, TNF alpha, IL-16, IL-6, IL-1B and HSCRP, along with the adhesion molecules. So basically inflammation is the culprit of atherosclerosis, and here we can see once this again the surface adhesion molecules are released, it goes back into the lumen and it brings some more monocytes, and this vicious cycle goes on. So ultimately what we observe that there is a deposition of lipid inside the endothelium, and the first sign of atherosclerosis is that there are the first signs are fatty streaks. These fatty streaks are visible without magnification. We can see it is shown by the arrows there. It consists of lipid containing foam cells in the arterial wall just beneath the endothelium, as a yellow discoloration in the artery's inner surface, and occurs in aorta and coronary artery of most people by the age of 20. Over a period of time, the fatty streak may evolve into either an atherosclerotic plaque, it may remain stable, or it may regress. If we intervene appropriately at this juncture, we may achieve regression. Now when we talk about achieving regression, there is a problem, so we need to have a solution to that. So what are the tools that we have today with us? So the therapeutic tools today that we have with us is statins, apoproteins, HSCRP, statins which act on apoproteins and HSCRP, ACE inhibitors, ARBs, antiplatelets, PPAR gamma agonist, TNF inhibitors, that is canakinumab, and there are some trials which are going on CRP, IL-6 and inhibitors like methotrexate. So these are the drugs which we have today, and these are the site shown in the red that these drugs are acting. In the vessel lumen, statin is acting as an anti-inflammatory. At the macrophage level, PPAR gamma agonists are acting, antiplatelets acting on platelets, and TNF inhibitor like canakinumab, they are acting on the pro-inflammatory products released by the macrophages. Statins, as we know, it has got a pleiotropic effect. It has got many sites of action. Then there are some novel therapeutic agents or targets which are under study, which are upcoming, and these novel therapeutic agents are 3-HAA anti-inflammatory metabolites and NF-kB anti-inflammatory agents like curcumin. So I'll be talking in the next few slides about these two drugs. So these novel therapies, the 3-HAA anti-inflammatory metabolites, they act on the dendritic cells, and NF-kB anti-inflammatory drug like curcumin, they act upon they inhibit the pro-inflammatory mediators released by drug like the cells like macrophage, and they act upon NF-kB pathway. Coming to 3-HAA analogs, they possess anti-proliferative, anti-inflammatory and anti-genotoxic effects. In one of the animal study which was done, it was found that 3-HAA had a favorable effect on the plasma lipid levels. So we can see here in the first graph the plasma cholesterol and the triglyceride level. The black one is the group which was treated by 3-HAA, whereas the white bar were the group which were treated by placebos. So compared to placebos, 3-HHA group had a significant decrease in the plasma cholesterol and triglyceride levels. When this was studied as per their effect on the VLDL or HDL, it was found that it significantly reduced the VLDL levels and it marginally increased the HDL levels also. So 3-HAA significantly decreases plasma lipids by about 1/3 to 2/3 levels. This was the conclusion of the study which was done by Zhang and Zhang et al., published in European Journal in the year 2012. In the same study, the effect of 3-HAA on inflammation was studied, and what they found was that 3-HAA significantly reduced the infiltration of CD4 T cells in the atherosclerotic lesion. So we can see here in the PBS group, the CD4 level was quite high, which came down after treating with 3-HAA. And the same effect, the positive effect, was seen in the atherosclerotic plaques. It significantly reduced the inflammation, and they claimed that almost approximately 80% of reduction in the atherosclerotic lesion was seen. But this was in the animal models. We don't know how effective it is in human beings. So to summarize, 3-HAA is an intermediate product of kynurenine pathway, that is tryptophan metabolism. It has clinically significant benefit. It is a powerful inhibitor of atherosclerotic lesion, beneficial effects on lipid metabolism with reduced VLDL, chylomicron and increased HDL levels. And 3-HAA significantly reduces the vascular inflammation. Coming to the second drug, curcumin. Curcumin basically, its generic name is difurollyl methane, and it is a polyphenol which is responsible for the yellow color of the curry spice which we all know as turmeric or haldi. The yellow pigmented fraction of the turmeric contains curcuminoids which are chemically related to its principal ingredient curcumin, and the major curcuminoids present in the turmeric are D-methoxycurcumin, bis-D-methoxycurcumin and cyclocurcumin or curcumin 1. The curcumin 1 was recently identified. The curcumin has diverse range of molecular targets, including it acts on transcription factors, growth factors and the receptors, cytokines, enzymes, genes regulating the cell's proliferation and apoptosis. As a result, several therapeutic effects of curcumin have been observed, and modern scientific research has demonstrated its following properties. That is, it has got anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-carcinogenic, anti-thrombotic and cardiovascular protective effects. Curcumin has been used in variety of disease in traditional medicine because it has got cancer effects, anti-cancer effects also. So it has been used to suppress carcinogenic activity in a wide variety of carcinogens in cancers of colon, duodenum and so on. Its anti-inflammatory properties may have some favorable results in rheumatoid arthritis, which Dr. Suresh Kodlali is going to speak. It has got positive effect on post-operative inflammation and inflammatory bowel disease. It is also useful in early renal graft function and in patients with chronic pancreatitis, or it is claimed that it may even improve the cognitive function in the elderly. Various studies have been published. In one of the study, the curcumin was found to, it was an animal study, and curcumin and adriamycin induced cardiotoxicity was studied in this paper. The study involved rats which were given adriamycin, and after giving adriamycin, it was found that adriamycin increased the heart rate. It led to ST segment elevation in some of them. It decreased myocardial glutathione content and decreased the glutathione peroxidase activity, increased the serum lipid peroxide and cardiac catalase activity, and all this led to adverse effect on the myocardium. In these group, they gave curcumin, and the dose given was 200 milligram per kg, given 7 days before and 2 days following the adriamycin, and the result was that there was a significantly prevented those effects which were induced by adriamycin. So that was the conclusion of this study. The mechanism of preventive effects of curcumin is unclear, but they proposed a multiple possible mechanism. It inhibits the lipid peroxidation by scavenging free radicals, blocking the lipid chain reaction, increases the glutathione content, and helps in maintaining the membrane integrity, promote the non-enzymatic detoxification of hydroxyl radicals and lipid peroxidase, may protect against cardiac injury via membrane stabilizing effect, supported by the fact that curcumin prevented the ECG changes induced by adriamycin. Curcumin in diabetic cardiovascular complications were also studied. It was found that it increased oxidative stress has been associated with the pathogenesis of chronic diabetic complications, including the cardiomyopathy. Nitrous oxide pathway augments the oxidative stress, and nitrous oxide is produced by a set of 3 nitrous oxide enzymes, as we know, enose, inose, and ennose. These enzymes convert L-arginine, L-citrulline, leading to generation of free radicals, and many studies have shown that enose, inose play an essential role in pathogenesis of cardiovascular complication in diabetes. Curcumin has a striking antioxidant property. It down-regulates the nitrous oxides. It reduces the NO oxidation by sequestering the reaction intermediate nitrogen dioxide. It may prevent the development of cardiovascular complication in diabetes. A study done by Farhan Gokhi and co-workers investigated the effect of curcumin on diabetic-induced changes in vasoactive factors, including nitrous oxide in rats, and they demonstrated that the myocardial tissue from the diabetic rats exhibited increased level of enose and inose mRNA as compared to control rats. So curcumin treatment prevented enose and inose mRNA upregulation, showing a decrease in the oxidative DNA damage. The mechanism involved was activation of NF-kB pathway and activation of protein 1AP. Curcumin also has got membrane stabilizing effects in myocardial infarction. The supportive evidence is formation of autophagic vacuoles, disruption of lysosomes, and spread of lysosomes throughout the cell. Stabilization of membrane of ischemic myocytes, including the lysosomal membranes, may potentially protect the cells from autolytic and heterolytic damage, attenuate the tissue damage due to myocardial ischemia. A study done by Nirmala and co-workers found a significant increase in the serum and myocardial tissue of lysosomal hydrolase activity, including aglucuronidase, N-acetyl glucosaminidase, cathepsin D, and acid phosphatase. Curcumin treatment resulted in the decrease in the enzyme activity almost near to the control levels. So we can say that the cardiovascular benefits of curcumin are enormous. The antioxidant effects of curcumin have been shown to have following effects. It attenuates the adrenomycin-induced cardiotoxicity, may prevent diabetic cardiovascular complication. It has got anti-thrombotic properties, it has got anti-proliferative properties which can be used in heart failure patients. It has got anti-inflammatory property, decreases the serum cholesterol level. Thereby, it may protect against the pathological changes occurring with the atherosclerosis. There is another substance called P300 HAT, and its inhibitory effects of the curcumin have been demonstrated to ameliorate the development of cardiac hypertrophy and heart failure in animal models. The inflammatory effects of the curcumin may have possibility of preventing atrial arrhythmias, and the possible effect of curcumin for correcting the calcium homeostasis may play a role in prevention of some of the ventricular arrhythmias. The preclinical studies from animal to clinical data in human are being published and are published in some of the journals. So, to summarize, curcumin anti-inflammatory role in CVD: it decreases C-reactive protein, it decreases MI associated with CABG, significantly reduces the serum cholesterol level, improves the left ventricular diastolic function, prevents the progression of diabetic nephropathy by attenuating the proteinuria, and decreases the fasting blood glucose, HbA1c, insulin resistance index, that is HOMA-IR. This has been substantiated by various publications published in some of the renowned journals. So, once again, just to remind that curcumin, it acts on the NF-kB act. This is just a revision of NF-kB pathway so that we can understand the action of curcumin. The inflammatory stimuli, it activates the NF-kB. The activated NF-kB then translocates itself to the nucleus of the cell, and then it releases the pro-inflammatory cytokines as well as adhesion molecules. This is basically happening during atherosclerosis. So what does this curcumin do? So curcumin, it prevents the activation of NF-kB. This is one site where it acts. Number two is it prevents the translocation of the NF-kB to the nucleus of the cell. It prevents the release of inflammatory mediators, and thereby it prevents the inflammation. So curcumin has got multiple sites of action. So thereby, with all this, it appears that curcumin could be one of the very promising drugs in addressing these novel targets of cardiovascular risk factors. There are some other promising therapies also which are being studied. Some immunomodulatory or immunosuppressive promising therapies such as cyclosporin, colchicine may have benefits in CAD. Methotrexate, a potential cardioprotective anti-inflammatory effects through increased adenosine level, is under trial. There is a trial going on called TETHIS trial, that is to study the effect of methotrexate therapy on ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. This will evaluate the low dose methotrexate in ST elevation AMI. There is another trial called CERT trial, that is cardiovascular inflammation reduction trial, which will evaluate the low dose methotrexate in patients with high prevalence of subclinical vascular inflammation. Another study called CANTOS, that is canakinumab anti-inflammatory thrombosis outcome study, will evaluate canakinumab in patients with CAD and persistently elevated CRP. The blockage of other potential targets such as IL-6 receptor, CC2 chemokine receptor, CD20 could bring benefits in patients with CAD. So to conclude, despite optimum therapy with current drugs, still 1/3 of low risk individuals with 0 to 1 risk factors have been known to develop acute cardiovascular events. Tackling inflammation provides potential to improve cardiovascular outcomes further. and some molecules targeting inflammation are being developed to provide a unique addition to the cardiovascular armamentarium. Thank you very much.